just thinking about how we would curate that would be tricky. So,
Right, but I think if we were all to spend like, let's say 5 or 10 minutes together, just go through the list.
okay.
I think anything that has theory in the name, I think is a good one. And anyone that earned like probably the first 10 that don't have theory, I would just skip because the pipeline changed.
So one of the things I was going to ask Alfonso to do is for those sort of more nuts and bolts. How do you use this? I was just actually going to ask him to represent them maybe more quickly for us to have as a new record. Because that's the thing. The thing that I'm worried about is that the pipeline. There was a kind of watershed moment when the pipeline became what it is. But as we got there, it seemed it changed a fair amount.
But do you want to bring up?
I don't know if that's necessary though, because there's a lot that we were talking about. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's still the same, just how you implement it is different. So if we all split it up and took, I would say probably, Alfonso, it would probably take no more than like a half hour each. This is theory that you can pay attention to, right? Like,
so we can annotate.
It's all there, and I think the stuff that we need is all there.
Yeah, and the theory is going to be.
Well, that's
the same. It's just the exact implementation. You just want to skip off.
Yeah, and the recent implementation.
Yeah.
And the document is pretty up to date.
Yeah.
So you can use them as a supplement to like give you the theory, and then you check the document for what you actually type in the term.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. So, Alfonso, we're just going back and just saying, now that we're sort of at a point when the pipeline is together, thinking about Hillary and new people coming in, how to sort of direct them to the videos. So we were thinking maybe we should all just split up the videos and mark, for this video, just pay attention to this section. It's about theory because the rest is sort of old information, that kind of thing.
Right, exactly. And perhaps while we do that, since we kind of made the videos as we were making the software as well, if you notice that there are some places that are kind of out of date, and perhaps we could do like a redo of some sections if you think they are kind of too old.
That's what Jason had said.
Okay, excellent.
The people here were trying to save you some effort, Alfonso.
I just have a feeling it's all there, right? Like,
yeah. I don't know. I will have to. I never actually went and listened to them. I have to say they are too long to go through that pain myself. But if you want to, you feel like doing that yourself and giving me a heads up about which are the sections that might need some updates, then we can organize some additional minutes to do just that. But also with the idea of new people, if you are thinking that there are some things that might be helpful for newcomers that might be, I don't know, that they are not there and might be also
so you're
additions.
a bit windy.
Sorry?
It sounds a bit windy.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let me guess. Yeah, that's my actually, what is the name of the thing? I have a fan right in front of my face because it's my air conditioning. Sorry about that. Air conditioning is not working, so I'm.
I just thought you were on a beach somewhere beautiful.
That's also why you don't see my face, because it's just it's painful to look at me right now. So yeah, sorry about that. I'll try to redirect it only when I don't have the mic on. So.
And can you join the Zoom meeting so that we can record with the actual screens? Because it's just the lovely pictures of us.
I can't do that, but yeah.
So the link is in the calendar. You click on the event.
I did see it. I didn't reply when you were I think it's and just because you. Yeah, I think it's.
I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah. No, I just think that's yes. So I saw it. Because I could be like, oh, yeah, and then actually, it's not my therapy.
And I think I've been meaning to go through and edit out all of my poor jokes. They're not preserved forever.
I don't. Yeah. I think that's.
I don't know. So how do you want to organize today? Do you have, Jason, some things to talk about the ROI stuff, or how are we organizing? Do you have any particular questions? We haven't done this meeting.
Well, I was going to just kind of pick up kind of where we left off, and
okay, fantastic.
And then we'll go where people want to go. But I do think that there are a few people that had some questions for you that we could take care. Do you want to take care of that now?
So, Alfonso, my question though is not FL related. So I wonder if maybe if you had a couple minutes at the end, because this is basically what we've been talking about. It's not going to be super long.
Okay.
Yeah. So if at the end, if you wouldn't mind, Alfonso, if we could check in about the LGI and the adult and kids who study.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. But if you don't mind, let's do that a little bit later. In about an hour, I have to take off to pick up the kids. They started school today, so my schedule is kind of like changing. So, but we can meet afterwards. So in an hour I'll leave, and then in about another half an hour or an hour we can meet again if you want to.
That'd be great.
With LGI. Sounds good.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
And Alfonso, I just have one request as well, that you check your email or search your email for an email from me. I don't know if you're getting them. But
right. Yes.
Same email. So
I know I have one recurrent email from you for one point that I'll get to that.
And I can send it again if you want it at the top of your inbox, but if you could just get.
I think I have it started already at the top of my invoice. And thank you. Sorry about that. I'll get to that as soon as possible.
I have so many demands.
I wish I was so prepared. Okay, so the last time we started talking about Freesurfer, which is for Hillary, we do our functional MRI analysis is the main focus for us, and that's what these meetings are kind of been about. Our the Frank Lab functional imaging pipeline, and then we'd also do a DTI analysis, and that is actually Matthias has been working on updating that, and we'll have, I think there'll be some tutorials about that coming up shortly. And then we also collect structural MRI data, and we largely use Freesurfer to process that data. And that we have actually recently started doing morphometrics, where we'll process the data and we'll get information about the volume of a given brain area. So, or get information about cortical thickness, things like that. But it tends to actually be useful for all of our pipelines. So we process the structural data, and from it we get information about where various brain regions are. So first cortex and white matter. We use Freesurfer, which actually come up with a cortical reconstruction. That's what we talked about last time. So it'll be a representation of the cortical surface. And then we will use that information, not just for brain labeling, but also for co-registering to, say, the functional data, co-registering to the DTI data, so that we can then take those brain labels and do some sort of ROI-based analysis. That could be like a literal ROI-based analysis, where say, for fMRI, we want to say, well, what's the mean activation during speech in the ventral premotor cortex compared to baseline? Or we might use it as a seeding for some sort of like a connectivity analysis. Or how we want to see what's the functional connectivity, the correlation of the fold response in GPMC and posterior superior temporal gyrus, or the.
You haven't done any neuroimaging.
I've done I did
Oh,
Like
so
someone
it's all sort of
like it wasn't
terms
my
are all
project,
very
but
specific
yeah,
to what
no,
they
I'm
are.
following that.
Okay,
So
great.
Yeah, I'm trying to be, I don't.
I've done like that.
Great.
Yeah,
Just
But
that's
And I think we'll have additional meetings that can start even later this week. Kind of go over, so I can fill you in on some of the background.
Okay.
So some of the other terms that we use make more sense. But ultimately, the high resolution structural image that we get is part of just about any analysis that we do. Very seldom do we do something where I should say some groups do. For the way that we do our analysis, very seldom are we just taking like the functional data and putting it into templates ways and reporting results that way. So one of these common templates that people use. So when we talk about processing our structural data, it's really this software tool called Freesurfer, which was developed at MGH. It's become widely popular. In fact, it's so popular that recently, I don't know if you guys are on the HCP data email list. Anybody on that? That's fine. You do not need to be on there. But I was on there, and I kind of forgot because I had the emails. Basically, I would have emails just sent to some archive, and then I just forgot about it. But then they made a change recently where they must have changed the email address so that now all of a sudden I'm getting those emails to my inbox, and it seems like 80% of all the emails regarding the processing of the human connectome data involve Freesurfer. So there's some guy that's a guy at HCP who's a software guy that's doing a lot of Freesurfer question and answer. So it's very popular. And what the process that generates this surface, so this, if you look on here, this cyan line, this white, gray-white surface, and this is what it looks like. It's called Recon All. So that's just, it's basically a wrapper script that comes along with the Freesurfer package, which allows you to run whatever steps of the Freesurfer processing that you want. So last week we talked about just running that. We talked about how when you run this, that surface is pretty darn good, but it's not always perfect, and we should always review it. And given where people are in their analyses, we're sort of punting on that topic for a bit, and we can maybe have Bobby come in. We have a whole slideshow on the review process, but the way we've done it, so one, it takes a little bit of experience to do this, and it helps if you have a lot of experience. So Bobby actually came from she worked at the same lab I worked in before I started grad school. We overlapped a little bit and just stared at brains all day, and manually. That's why she's well equipped to do this. So when the way this will work, when data come in, the person that's like the main student postdoc, whatever, that's assigned to that study, will pull the data from the scanner, and then we'll do things like run Recon All, and then we'll typically have Bobby do the actual review where you're looking at the slices and determining if there's a problem, and that sort of fixes it. But one thing that I did not mention last time that we'll go into, we'll spend a few minutes on today, is that even before something is handed off to Bobby, it's really helpful for us to look at some of the log output that Freesurfer generates, and that's not just for the recon. So we have the Recon All process, which we talked about last time, but then there are a bunch of other, there are some other commands that we will run, and one of them is generating this additional morphometric measure, which is local gyrification index, which is just a measure of basically like over a given patch of cortex, how much of it is in its sulcus and how much is not. So it's like a amount of fold in an area. And
So it's like when you get enough crystals that's just get it brain, and then you can
right,
put a touch on it.
right. That's something that I don't know if we'll get to that today, but we could discuss it at anybody that that I use can be taught tangent. So we can talk about that. But yeah, you get a surface of values where each vertex there's a gyrification index value, which is somewhat kind of difficult to wrap your head around. You can do the same thing with volume. So every vertex you can get a volume value. So
basically just like the first derivative where it's like super gyrified, it's going to be very steep, but if it's like pretty smooth, it's going to be pretty small value.
That was about like where you count it, right?
But I think it's once you decide that,
Then you can say how much.
It's
Yeah. So once you have the where, you can say how much.
So right, and it's not good enough. That's good enough for the
Sure.
solo array. But the idea is you can still get these when you run these. Those sorts of any process that you run starts with recon-all space do something. These log files are updated, so I want to just look through what those are, and just do a reminder of once you run this, what the Freesurfer directory looks like. So let me go over here, and let's start here. I'll just roll the dice. We'll roll the dice and start in this ACE directory, and we'll see what happens when something goes wrong.
You can see at the bottom a little like next to the exception.
You can also go to the full directory and move on stuff there.
Yeah, this will be risky. So okay, so in the Freesurfer scripts directory, you have the set of commands, or I'm sorry, a set of subdirectories, and the main this one here, where this is not usually here. This is something to do with the linking that Jen did in this. This directory MRI, label, and serve are the key directories that have the image data and the image data that are derived from the original structural. Where MRI is going to have information about the volumes, or I'm sorry, it'll have volume data, so the different
Before you run recon, you basically just start with T1.
right. You start with a T1, and you can actually literally start with the DICOMs. What we typically do is extract all the DICOMs and put them in Nifty format, which so Freesurfer predated Nifty, and so the volumes, for instance, will have these suffixes called MGZ. Was a Mass General format at the time, and that's still out Freesurfer when you run the recon all processes. I believe that's that's basically the default that it uses. But Freesurfer now plays very nicely with Nifty, so you can take any of the volume data and move it to Nifty format to use in any other software that you want to use. And I think you can even ask Freesurfer to work directly on Nifty's, at least a lot of the processing. But when you do something like use the recon all command to do a bunch of steps in the process, it will typically work in MGZ, or use the MGZ format. So that MRI directory that's in the subject directory will have process volumes, and then some. It'll even include some labeled information. So right here, I just have there's an original. I can show you where the original hangs out. It's not intuitive. What the original is. So there's this 001.mgz. That's the actual original T1 volume that's been converted to the .mgz format. Now notice that there is no .nii either. So that the original volume is copied into this format, but that volume itself is not copied here. And then out here in the there's even a volume called original MGZ. That is not the original volume. There's already been some processing done to this. So keep that in mind. So if you want the original, so what I would typically do is if you actually want the original T1 volume for any purpose, you would go to the original extracted volume, the Nifty that you derived from the DICOMs.
Where do we have like a standard list?
We should now, right? So Alfonso, do we have a standard location for the structural volumes in the FL pipeline, or do we just sort of point to the Freesurfer ones? So then I guess no. I mean, ultimately, what you,
Typically, just point to the Freesurfer ones, and then the FL pipeline will import them into its own kind of like a structure.
I mean, ultimately, a lot of what we do is just with the Freesurfer process data. So
Right.
it's not too big.
I just
but
think
we
that
can-
kind of a thing, though, as a it's very easy just to say this is how we do it.
Yeah. So typically, typically what we have is you have a subject directory, which is different than subject dir, right? Freesurfer is subject dir. You have a subject directory, and you could have raw data, you could have the dicoms, and you could have the extracted data, and then you have the different types of data. So structural data, T1, people use T1. So we can like at one point we actually worked on some labels for that, but I guess we didn't modify it. So but there'd be diffusion data, task fMRI, rest fMRI, structural data, other names. So we can
I think Matthias had
Yes.
that split it up. Right, that split it up.
Yeah.
So then it had the exact same language. for
Right.
everything.
So right when you're doing
Folder
so
labels. And we use that
So
for
that would,
workflows.
yeah, so Matthias made that extract all that information.
I see.
So
Which
that's,
is nice.
Yeah.
Then everything has the same folder name.
and that so yeah when we've had that for quite a while. There are different versions of it, but if the one that Matthias has seems to, I think it actually does work. It plays very nicely with the newer ETI data that we're collecting. So we could stick with that one. Okay, and some of the other big players here, and we talked about this a bit, so you guys remind me if it's are the this brainmask.mgz file and the webmatter.mgz. These are both volumes. We loaded those up in Freeview. We're gonna do that again and add some additional files. What I wanted to talk about first was even before you get to this, where we're going to load these up and look at them. So I'll put a pin in that for now, and we'll go back through Freeview and I'll discuss what these are again. Even before we get to that, you have this directory in here called scripts, and in this directory are a bunch of log files that are generated when you run recon all. And one of them is build stamp, and this one is theoretically pretty useful, but you got to keep something in mind. Scripts. It gives you the version of Freesurfer that was used, but this version was the Freesurfer version that was used when you first generated this subject's Freesurfer data directory. So that could change. You could, if something happens and the default on the system or something that you assign changes, that would differ. So what's more useful for that are a couple of these other jump around a bit. So this one.
By the way, when you're getting out of the list, you don't have to
Right. So so depending on what you're doing, less is one of these built-in terminal external commands for looking at reading text files. and the way less works is it'll just pop up into your screen the first number of lines that fit on the screen, and then you can scroll down. So this is useful if you think that what you're going to want to read is at the top of the text file, or it's a short text file. But there are a number of other ones that you can use. Let me just do one more here. So this file is huge. So reconall.log is a concatenated list of the output, all the output that's come from running reconall on this subject. So this subject's dir, since it was generated. And whenever that's run, you'll get some output here. It'll tell you like what the specific version of Freesurfer was that was used. And it'll give you the command that was run. So here, you're calling this Freesurfer command, and it's reconall with all these different flags here.
So, Jason, if this subject was run again on a different version of Freesurfer, would you see it at the top of this, or would you have to scroll down to the bottom?
You would see it. You would see it on. You would see it at the top of that process's log output. So for this here, it's going to have the output for the entire initial reconall for this subject, and that's a fairly lengthy thing, very, very lengthy. And then at some point that will end, and you will see they'll say something like new invocation of reconall, and then it'll give you that information. So it just concatenates that all along the way, so you can see the history of the reconall process. And if you do something, so if you want to really dig into this thing, then I would do something more like one of these built-in text file viewers and editors, and take a look, because then you have
Most recent.
most recent is at the bottom. Yeah. So here you can then you can search for finished. Exited. Okay, there we go. So there should be more things. I was hoping that this would show this. It seems almost impossible.
Yeah, I mean, for Ace, things were linked and then pulled in different places. It's possible that it wasn't one that was updated.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll try to use this one. The reason I did use this one is because I know that ended with an error. But ultimately, you can do so. See this line here: reconall exited with errors. That's you can use that as a way to cycle through this. Now, ultimately, you typically aren't going back. You're typically looking and saying, did it end with an error this time, or did it not? And that's the take-home message that I wanted for you today, is that when you're running recon, when it's done, take a look at these log files. And if you are running it with, we have these SG scripts that are used to do the batch processing. You want to make sure when you do that, you can assign an error output, right? You can assign where the log file goes from the batch process and where the error file goes. And those files, I don't know if they are exactly what's here. There may be, what I think is going to happen is if the error is something that's sort of like internal to the Freesurfer, it couldn't find a file that it's expecting, something like that, that'll all show up here on the recon. But if the error has something to do with the system, the computing system, then it'll show up. It'll show up there, and you'll see like this will just maybe end. It'll just end, and so you just want to check on that. So what you want to see is something.
These kind of error, it just tells me there's an error. No way of
This one should say something. So if you look up, it'll say error reading this file. And so what's happened here, I can actually, this will be useful for you, Liz, is that this FS average here, it's linked here. So when we're doing recon, most of the processing is done just on that individual subject's T1 data and the files that derive from that. But then once you get toward the end, as you know, there are labels applied. We apply our own labels, and Freesurfer has some default labels, and those labels are usually pulled from the FS average template. And Hillary, the FS average template here, what that is it's a process template. It's a template, a surface template, and there's a volume template that Freesurfer derived from something like we decided last time, 40 of the MNI 305 brain. So that's this one group that created this common space based on a bunch of brains. And so this template is like the average surface of those 40 adults. Okay. And there's a volume that's the average of those 40 adults too. And so what's Freesurfer, so those will have labels on them. And then when we're doing the Freesurfer recon processing, there is a mapping from the individual subject's surface to that FS average surface, and then you can use that to apply a bunch of different kinds of labels. So one of the things that Freesurfer does by default here, and that we don't really take advantage of, is a bunch of the Brodmann area labels. Okay. And more that it assigns by default. So in this case, what's happened is there was a link to, so what Freesurfer wants, remember we go back to, so remember this assignment of subjects dir that we always have to do before we run Freesurfer? It is pointing to this subject directory here, and the way the calls to recon all work is it's expecting there to be an FS average subject in that same directory. And of course, we don't have that's not the case. So I think originally what Freesurfer thought you'd do is you'd always store your data in the Freesurfer installs subjects directory. And of course we can't do that, right? We share this installed version. In fact, we've never used it. We've never done it that way. So what we have done is either literally copy Freesurfer, or I'm sorry, copy the FS average directory into that one. But because of all the different projects we're doing, that's a little bit inefficient. So we've linked to one that we want to use. And in this case, this one was linked to a directory, an installation of Freesurfer that is in a different location now. Nothing that we did. It was just, the system had this. There was this project called Iconic that we all shared software in, and that's gone since this was done. So whenever we're running some sort of recon all process, just trying to get the labels, the news, apply the speech like labels. When we do that for these ACE data, it's going to get an error, and so all the brains have an error. Or if you're trying to do LGI on this one, right? Anything where you're going to do recon all, it requires files in the FS average directory is not going to work. So we just have to update that link. All right, so check this out. I mean, this is a fairly uncommon error. Although I shouldn't say that. Usually, if there's an error, it's of this sort where nothing went wrong with Freesurfer. Everything's going well, especially for our adult data. Very seldom is there an error that's not associated with something that one of us did. Like you didn't not assigning the subject's dir is easily the biggest error. So you could, if you see an error, you keep track. I mean, makes it a little bit tricky because when we run our stuff, when we run recon all processes on the computing cluster, we're not running it directly. Like we're not running it directly from the command line. We're submitting it to this batch system. So there's this little black box in terms of like you getting the information and even the timing, because you submit it and it takes some time for it to find the number of cores it needs and it starts. And so it's really up to you as the user to make sure that you check that out. And if you see that it comes right back as an error, I would say.
Also, how long does it typically take for one subject to run, and does it vary? And do we have to change the wall time or anything like that when we submit the jobs to make sure that we don't?
I think from if you go from start to finish, I think we're in the 6-hour range now. Around
per subject, right?
Per subject. And when you're doing we often will run it again after we do some manual edits. That's usually 3.5 hours from that point on. You do have to ask for at least that. I think that there are some subjects that take a little bit longer, but I don't think it's a huge variation in the time. Does anybody have?
I don't recall the default for our system. Do you know for SCC? Do you know? I think it's like 12 hours or something like that, right?
I think so.
So it should be fine. So you never run into a situation where you need to extend it. That's right.
No,
okay.
No. It is true that we still haven't quite been able to achieve what Freesurfer says. The Freesurfer people say you can if you do parallelization of the processes that you're able to parallelize, and you're using GPUs. So I think they're saying we can get it down to under 4 hours now, start to finish. But we haven't been able to do that yet. But 6 hours seems like a miracle compared to what it used to be. So we'll take it.
Spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to access cores.
Nobody asked that.
Yeah,
Don't do that, especially before he goes on his trip. Sabotage his efforts. Okay.
It's all with 1 millimeter structural volumes, right? Or do we have like a variation in the voxel size that we use?
You do not need 1 millimeter cube voxels. You can use whatever. And until Friday, my understanding was that Freesurfer would by default resample them to 1 millimeter cube. But now I think they're not doing that.
So I think that if you don't have 1 millimeter, it's worth looking at the forums. I didn't go into it too in depth, but essentially there was a bug in the code where they called it a bug, where they were assuming that everything was 1 millimeter. So I don't know if they were upsampling it or they were just assuming it was 1 millimeter. As long as you're using anything after 5.3.0, whatever you use is fine. It's just if it's only if you went back to use an earlier version. So they were saying people with older information, there might be some issues with that because when people were looking at it and they were realizing that the voxel size and their volume were identical. So that's how people were realizing it, which makes sense if you have a 1 by 1 by 1, but it doesn't make sense if it is a different configuration.
Okay.
So that's where it sort of came up.
Okay.
But for now, it should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most of it's 5.3, and all of our structural data is 1.1.1 for the last 12 plus years.
Yeah. So it only matters.
Yeah. And I suspect that before it would just take care of it. But I think when you went way back in time, it would just, because then at that time we weren't getting 1.1. So either the templates themselves were 2 millimeters, or were a bigger voxel size. So I think it was just automatically doing it, and you're just sort of assuming it would do it. But then you get to this tricky middle part where maybe they are, maybe they aren't 1 millimeter. But we've been using essentially the same structural protocol for a long time, and the main reason for that is it's still the protocol that the Freesurfer people recommend for doing this reconstruction. Okay, so this is the recon all wide. So if I just, so when you're looking through this is a very detailed file. It'll have the different commands. So there's these specific commands, and I think I showed this last time, but just in case not, there is this great table online that goes through all the recon steps, and you have the names of these different commands here that are run, so different steps along the processing stream. this is all, you'll have this, this is in a bunch of locations, including the slideshow. So it'll list that, and it's a good, it's a very thorough list of what's going on. There are occasions where I don't see the error listed, but I believe that that's usually because it's a system, like a batch system error. So be wise in how you assign the error log files, because they're very helpful. In fact, they're so helpful that they help me find. I was trying to find like what one of our brains would have an error at the end of this, and that immediately probably the ACE scans, and then you go in there. Liz has the error logs right there, and I could see that this error, and then was able to diagnose the problem. Nope. And here's another file that just is more of a summary. So this may even, in terms of trying to figure out whether or not there was an error, I'd probably just go to this one first. This one concatenates just the steps that were run for each recon invocation. So we have this one from 2016. And let's see if there's errors at the end. If I were to go to okay, so here's some evidence of this. So this is that same status file that goes through the different things that were run, tells you when each step started. And then, okay, new invocation of recon. Another one. And then this one right here, local verification index, finished without error recently in August. Okay, so check these, and you don't have to always use G, this kind of thing, but you can do things for checking these. Like, let's say I wanted to look at the end of the long recon, perhaps over tens of lines. You can use this function, and then you can set like how many. This just gives you the last 50 lines of that one. It's finished without error. You can see what it was running. This is more detailed. All right. Okay. So, and then a couple other things that are in here. There are a few different other files here. These reconall.done.command.environment. They just give you some information very briefly about the command that was run. I think the environment, like the system environment that was used, maybe probably like the core or the processor that was run. And then done just gives you some more meta information about the process, not information about the recon process, but the actual system level. So, and that's only for the most recent version, or the most recent invocation of recon. And the other ones you don't really need to worry about, or I should say that I'm not aware of your need to worry about it. So, and then there's another file that can be in here. That's the name is, I'll just write it here so you can see it, and it's in. So this file you may see in here too. And I'm bringing this up because it's just another one of these things like not setting your subjects to error or having a bad link to a file that can cause things to crash and cause delays where it could be a very simple fix. So when Freesurfer when you call recon all on a given data set, it creates this temporary isRunning.lh plus rh file in the scripts directory. And if there's if recon crashes for some reason that it stops, it may not remove this file. And then when you go to run it again, it won't let you run recon on that data set, because the purpose of this file is to prevent you from starting a recon process on a subject and then starting another one before the first one has finished. So this is something that, another one of these, when you submit a job, you see that, oh, it just started, and then moments later it looks like it exited. This is a common cause for that. And I think there's actually a flag so that will override this, but it's one of those things where when you feel comfortable, go for it. If you feel really comfortable, maybe add that to your script for the recon album. Until then, it's probably a nice check, especially if you're doing a lot of batch. If you're doing a lot of batch jobs, and you're testing things out, you're running, there's a chance that, because who knows what kind of havoc that could cause.
So if this crashes it, can you just delete that file?
You just rm is running, just get rid of it and just
Make
restart.
sure there wouldn't be catastrophic. Everything you're saying sounds like just get rid of it.
Just get rid of it.
Like useful
Yes.
information.
Be aware of it. I mean, ultimately, what this makes you aware of is Freesurfer. There is not a recon process on that scale going on as you start it again. You're making absolutely sure that there's. Well, I guess once you make sure, you could check that file and make sure that it's not running at present. Which you can do through any number of means. What we were just talking about, recon all status.log. If I do the fastest thing to do, you look at the end of that. If it's like, it looks like it's processing still, it's just the process started 20 minutes ago. Then you might want to go back and check your scripts to see, like, did do I have this thing? I don't think that's going to happen often. The bigger thing is that it's not really an issue, except that this crashed, and it's just going to cause you to not know what's going on, and then you know what you need. I'm trying to figure out what happened.
Like a little post-it note that says you tried and failed. Here's the evidence.
Okay, so those, I wanted to go over those, and then I thought we load up.
Can you just talk a little bit more about, like, you mentioned there was edits and then there's something to do, like, what do you do that completely rerun something, and what do you, like, if you're trying to make changes, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
I feel like you can accidentally completely run something, or you can add something.
When you run something, I'll go to the table here. Right? So you run recon all with a certain step. So actually, let me just I'll go back to this for a moment, just so that it's a refresher, and take a look at what this command looks like. Let's see what so we're running the script. I thought I had in here the actual command. That's it. Oh, there was that's right. That's over here that I did delete. Before I got here. But okay, so let's go to I can find this.
Also, if you need the delete,
use
command change.
Yeah, well, that we'll go this. We'll get right to the source, and then mistakes. Okay, so this is one of these SGE files that we would point to. And it says a bunch of things. This is where, by the way, in here is where you set where you want your job input output to go. It's the next thing to do. But just recon all. So let's say this is the command. This is the command we're going to run. Okay. So recon all dash S, the subject name. We have these flags for running it because we know that we have an MP rates acquisition. We know that we're doing it on 3T. This is somewhat superfluous for our needs, but it's in here. It matches what we did with the kids at Stutter. Okay, so what we're saying here is that we want to do what's down here where we actually are getting to what parts of the recon all process we want to run. So if you run recon all space subject dash all, it's going to rerun the whole thing. So ultimately, that's what recon will do. It'll do what you're telling it to do. So if I go here, this tells us some of these different things. So if I say I want to do recon all dash auto recon 1, it's going to run these steps right here, from here down to here. And recon all 2 is going to run these steps. So if I were to, you can get more specific information, but essentially, the recon all 1 is doing things that are preparing the volume for doing the surface reconstruction. And then auto recon 2 effectively, essentially, is then doing the surface reconstruction, the individual surface reconstruction for you. And then 3 is taking that individual surface, morphing it into the template space, applying labels, extracting morphometric information, things like that. So essentially, you tell it. So it will answer the question of when you know you're going to overdo something. You know it when you tell recon to do that.
So where are the edits?
So the edits made. So when it runs. So what you'll see in here, and what's the thing that I like about this table is it tells you literally the command that they run. So recon all, like I said before, is just a wrapper.
Mm-hmm.
All that does is it just says, okay, you tell me what step you want to run. You tell me where the data are, and I will run these steps. And so it has a Freesurfer that comes with all these different functions that do a bunch of different things. And you can see what the input data files are and the output data files. So when you rerun it, it basically is going to overwrite anything that had to be created anew. So if let's say you did auto recon, you ran all of the recon all steps, all of them, and you realize, oh, there's the white matter surface does not look good. You consulted with Bobby. She agreed. She suggested some edits. And then what you can do is you don't need to do these steps again. So these files here would not be. I shouldn't say that. Many of these files would not be updated. But any file that's then updated down here, when you run it, if you start from auto recon 2, so that skips all of these steps, would be updated. And that's appropriate.
So the files that are being edited, the files that we are going to be editing are the files that are on the surface.
Okay, so there are two kinds of edits that we can talk about. So let's say, so we talk about this, I kind of leaving it as this, in the future thing where you might be reviewing brains and wanting to make the edits that Bobby does to the actual volume. So there are two review processes that we use to do with Freesurfer. One is, do the surfaces look good or not? And then, so let's stick with that one. With that, what you can do is you can go in and then edit the volume. So if I were to look at the two volumes that you would typically edit would be the brain mass volume and the white matter volume. And I can even, if you guys, it seems like it would be appropriate to just pull something up there.
But I guess just before we go to that, because I'm just trying to figure out, like, since a lot of this data has already been edited, it's already been looked at, we're going in to do stuff, at what step is it safe to go back to?
So that's
what I'm trying to figure
right.
out.
So for what you want, so the stuff that you would typically edit, so would be like the labels. So if you're applying new labels, that's outside of but think of that as like the reconstruction's done. We got the surfaces that we have, or the segmentation that we have. All we want to do now are generate new, say like you want to generate new morphometric data, or you want to generate new label files.
So I guess I'm coming from a specific example where I'm having an error with the LGI, which is saying I need to do recon or recon 2. Am I going to, like, because I did get an error downstream or something I need to do, how far back can I go and be safe?
So if you rerun auto recon 2, then what you would need to do, so long as you weren't editing the volume, so the volumes that are the source of what auto recon 2D steps are. So and those are the white matter MGZ volume and the brain mask MGZ volume. There's one more volume that we've never really touched. So what we've done is we've done all these edits, especially on the ACE scan. Well, especially on the pediatric study, child kids study. We've done some time-intensive edits on those to try to make the actual reconstruction of the surface themselves look good. That's labor-intensive. We do not want to overwrite those. When you, we can think about some quality control that we can add in here, but ultimately, if you just run the auto recon step again, it could change it wouldn't change the brain mass volume. That would be the same. It could change the white matter volume a bit because that works because of how that volume is generated. It's more of a probabilistic process. For the brain mass volume, brain mass volume is just basically like, where's the brain? Where's the brain? And if there's a value at a voxel, it thinks it's brain. If it's not, it doesn't. So that's deterministic. White matter is a little bit different. So we have some scripts that we can use to copy over the white matter, these files that are the key files. So of all the files that you see here, there are basically like three, two, just the brain mass and the white matter that are sort of essential for us to get effectively the same output from the surfaces. You can just recreate the surfaces. So it would require more manual work. But if you're getting an error that says you have to do all of auto recon 2 again, then we should probably think about like, what we can do, like whether or not we need to have Bobby review it again.
Okay, so these are
Sorry to interrupt, guys. I just need to take off, so I just want to say bye, and I'll see the end of the video once you put it up. See you guys.
Alfonso, could you just send us an email or do
Yeah,
chat?
I'll send you a message as soon as I get back to so that we can meet for the LGA stuff. Okay, see ya. Sorry about that.
Okay, no, thanks. So the one that I'm thinking about right now, it doesn't matter because there aren't manual edits. I just wanted to understand. So it seems like for us moving forward, if something has been run already, the safest thing is not to do any of the auto recon steps without talking. Right? It just feels like there's no line.
I would do that. I would do that, and I think that policy can change. This is something new we're jumping through. And so before, whenever this would happen, I was the user, so I would kind of, I'll change it. If I change it, I know how to fix it, things like that. But I think that because we're doing LGI now, and if it's asking for those kind of changes, bring it to our attention. But what I think can happen is we'll just, once we recognize this is when we do need to rerun it, we can rerun it, and we'll just have Bobby review it again. Or maybe that you get to the point where you can just look at it. If it's one of these high quality scans that didn't seem like it needed edits at the start, maybe it's fine. But let's walk through those examples together and see what happens. Because what we've done for the actual labeling process, because it's so important to keep a record of just those couple of key files. And we also keep the surfaces. So we just have some scripts that we run when we're doing editing. Every time we look at these, we run a script that copies the key outputs, frame mask, white matter, and then the surfaces. The surfaces we can regenerate from those other ones, but just so we can have a log. Because when you're doing the editing process, you can introduce edits that actually make it work, so it makes it easy to go back. So we have everything we have everything we need to do that. But let's just take a look. I'm curious to see really what if it's when we rerun it. Yeah, like that.
So I think that it seems to be, when I looked it up online, there was an error with the, they think there was like an incorrect sampling somewhere. So I was getting an LGI value that was out of range, and then the forms had said the best thing to do was just rerun the surface, or recon 2, or recon 3, and then it should work fine. So I just haven't done it yet. Dropped it, but because I think there's one on this one. But that's some work. You know, that's the same reason that some of the, I'm guessing, with the CWS kids have zeros for their LGI, so they're going to be students too. So there just seems to be somewhere, but it hasn't come up for anything. I haven't done it on ACE yet, so that'll be good. When I get to ACE, if I have any of those, then we can have it, because it doesn't matter. But that's good, so I know that there's stuff.
And this LGI thing, it's not something that any given group would have to do. It's just something that was done on the kids who started and showed up some interesting results.
Yeah, Frank
So
told me
now
to
we're
do on ACE also.
now we're kind of now we're stuck with it because it takes forever to do. It's that local term.
Oh, right. Well, and if it's something that we're going to keep wanting to look at, you should put it in the initial step.
Yeah, we can. The tricky thing is that you want to run it after you're sure that everything looks good. So we can just have it in there and just have it run each time, but it adds like a couple hours. So it can keep it in there, and then people just have to realize that you can start looking at these things. Yeah.
Already.
And when you're doing the labeling, this is one thing that's very we do need to. Most of the recon stuff it's hard to goof up like in the call. But one thing you can do is overwrite the label files that we generate. So when you're running Freesurfer, it by default in this auto recon 3 step will label, where is that? There's this right here. So it'll label surfaces with this default with the default set of very coarse ROIs, like the entire superior temporal gyrus, entire central or precentral gyrus, things like that, and a few others. But then we want to go in and actually add our labels. So we will do that after this is done. We'll go in and we will take our speech lab protocol labels and apply them. And the way that we do that, and what type of this topic could be, it's pretty. I would say that would be like a good topic for the next meeting. So, but briefly, we go in and outside of this, we label them again. If you do that and you do not give it, and you give it the name of a previous label file, it will overwrite it. There's no good way to stop that, because we cannot operate here without having group permissions. Otherwise, this whole thing will fall apart in terms of how we collaborate on this stuff. So there's no way to do that. So what we're going to want to do is just have some standards, which is when you generate labels, you use one, you're aware of what labels are already there. Two, you use the label name. The name of the file that you want to generate should reflect the parcellation that you used as the input. And when you generate stats from those, you continue to use that nomenclature consistently.
I think one thing that might be helpful, and I'm going to do this document the most, is if we restructure the examples in the Alfonso SL pipeline, where instead of having an example of label name, it has more like a notation, like your label name here.
Yeah.
And then it won't be just copy and paste.
Okay, and for that document, I think that it would be good to get some feedback on the actual structure of it too, where it's like it started out as like a list of resources, but then I think it's gonna become like an actual resource in itself, like a how-to. So maybe having like a section. So right now I have this at the very start is instead of our labeled FS average range, it's one of these protocol classifiers, and you can use this function to label it. And but we've gotten away from that, and for a few reasons, I'm going to discuss that next time. But that's a resource, and then I talk about the different annotation files and why you'd want to use them. And the way that they're written, it says, okay, the first one is here's what we have. Next one is this is like that one, but with this change, this change, and then I highlight the ones that are the final ones that we use now. But maybe I could have a section at the start that's just like these are the most common things you're going to use. This one, this one, this one, this one, and then point to below for more information about those. If you think that would be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, like it's just like I notice things as a new user going through it, so like I don't know if it would be helpful, like write those out explicitly as I go through, right? Because if somebody who's not aware of this going through, there's some stuff that are really helpful and some stuff. Okay. So I could sort of put like the learning process down and then either move it somewhere else or something like that. But what things mean, where to look for things.
Okay.
One in that document.
Yeah, any information about that, and it could be actually moving things, or it could be notes to be about to move.
Great.
Yeah, I get into it more on similar infos.
It's nice to have someone else.
Yeah.
And I think you're open to us.
Definitely.
Great.
Definitely. You can do things. Well, we have the history here. You can do things like move things and then like just like show something in a comment and say this. I mean, it's more at this point. It is more for you than for me. Although, like some of these commands that generate the labels, I have to
right, but it's more like how we were just going through the MRIs anatomical stats, and I actually now see this is probably we got template from, but now we have a new way to run it, so I've updated that. But I can continue to do that. But that's just, I've run it the most recent.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Came from.
It is interesting that they do it differently.
Yeah.
But
like, I wonder how old this is. I wish they had like an update thing.
Well, it's for version 6.0.
Which is crazy. That doesn't work for us.
But it may be that what they're trying to get here is a little bit different than what we're trying to get.
Maybe it's like that if you're coming from nothing, but we're saying, yes, there's something else here. Ignore it and do something different. Like maybe there's some like syntax thing there where they're like also generating a folder or something like that, right? Like,
yeah. Well, it also makes you feel better about the fact that it's there.
Yep.
Because I did when I went through there. I purposely went here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, well, why don't we stop there? And so the next time we do this, next Monday, we'll actually go through the label of what different annotation files we have, the differences, and how to generate them. And then one of the things that I'm missing is the updated, I can grab that, I was going to say the updated LGI stuff. So it's easy enough that the command's easy enough, but if there's, if you send me just like the script that you're using, add that to the stats.
Yeah, I can put it all.
It's interesting to, now that we're going back to actually doing the function. That's what I did before I started grad school. the morphometry. I was telling Liz the other day that I thought in a million years I would never be involved in automatically generating morphometry because as good a job as Freesurfer does, it's still not perfect. But, some areas are not all that well labeled, not the protocol labeled areas that we look at. But it's way better than what most people are doing. So let's stick with it. Yeah. Do morphometry.
Can you share your slides?
Yeah.
Even if
They're a work in progress.
It's all of our slides.
yeah,
We promised not to touch.
prompts are arbitrarily.
Yeah, arbitrary.
Hillary, do you have a
Yes, Hillary at BU.